A lot of kids don't like Mondays, but I do. The start of a new week is full of so many possibilities. And, oh my days, who is she? Whoa, she's beautiful. She is the prettiest girl I've ever seen. She must be new here because I definitely haven't seen her around here before. I'm Evan, and as you can see, I'm kinda short and skinny. I might not be a muscly jock or anything, but I do have a big brain. I'm top of the class in math, sciences, geography, and soy el mejor de la clase en español. I'm proud of my collection of trophies and awards, and as a result, lots of kids in school know who I am. But I don't really like talking to new people. For such a smart guy, I find small talk awkward. It's like the words freeze in my head or something. Anyway, this is the main reason why I've been single for, well, forever. It doesn't matter, I need to focus on my studies anyway. But I do like girls, especially petite girly girls who need me to protect them. Being the smart guy I am, it didn't take me long to find out that the new girl is called Kayla. Kayla. What a sweet name. After a few days of looking through her social media accounts, I'd fallen deep for her. I wanted to tell her how I felt, but I'm just too shy and awkward. So I asked my best friend Liam for advice. Bro, what are you so scared of? You're the #1 guy in this school. Yeah, but only with books. Liam nudged me and said, Only? Dude, it's a big deal being that smart. Girls absolutely love it. You're a bright-looking guy and a top student. Just need to add a little bit of confidence, my friend. I was not sure about that, but what do I know? And Liam is good with girls, so I had to trust him. In fact, I am smart, and I should be proud of it and use it to my advantage. So what should I do to make a move? Now you need to prepare her a gift and surprise her with it in the canteen. Girls love romantic gestures like that. What kind of gift? Don't sweat it. Just get her something you think she'll like. The next day at recess, I carried a box to the canteen. I spotted her sitting with her friends. Oh boy, this was terrifying, but also kind of exciting. As I walked over to her, I noticed how pretty she looked today. Suddenly, she stood up and went to the food stall. Okay, so she was taller than I thought. Yeah, she's quite a bit taller than I thought. Oh no, she's a giant in comparison to me. Abort mission, abort! I turned around and started to walk off when I accidentally bumped into someone and dropped my box. All of my trophies and awards scattered across the floor, along with the love letter I'd written for Kayla. My eyes locked on it, and I was about to leap forward and grab it, but the girl picked it up. Then in a really loud voice said, Oh look, Evan has a crush on Kayla. Who knew a nerd could have such high standards? Or should I say, tall standards? Then everyone burst out laughing. Oh boy, this was embarrassing, so I hurried out of there. Liam, who had been waiting for me outside, stopped me as soon as I passed the door. Dude, what was that? Are you really giving her those as a gift? He snatched the box out of my hand and took a look inside. Well, you said to get her what she liked, and you also said girls like smart guys, so don't these show off enough of my charm? No, not like that. I just expected you to get her a teddy bear or some flowers. Evan, this ain't it. So, this was it. My life was over. I'll be a laughingstock forever. I'll have to convince my parents to let me move schools. No, to let me move planets. Huh? It's from Kayla. What? She says she likes me too. Is this thing broken or something? Wow. She says she's heard a lot about me and she admires my achievements. And she wants to hang out sometime. Not long after that, we started dating. She's such a fun girl to be around. But there's one thing bugging me. She's so tall and standing next to her constantly reminds me that I am so short. It never really bothered me before, but it does when I'm around her. People have always said I'm small-framed, but being next to her makes me feel like I'm a hobbit or something. I decided to bulk up, so I started going to the gym, but it was so hot and sweaty in there, it made me feel sick. So I gave up. I was born this way anyway. There's nothing I can do about it. Meanwhile, Kayla didn't seem to bother that I was smaller than her, and being seen in public with me didn't faze her at all. But I don't know, I just didn't feel comfortable. So after class, when she was waiting for me by the door to go to lunch together, I muttered out some excuse about needing the library and I'd meet her there in a bit. I know it sounds bad, but I didn't want to hang out with her at school. as I didn't want the other kids gawping at us and making fun of our height difference. I've been in here all lunchtime. I don't want to see Kayla. Oh no, there she is. Phew, she's gone. Oh, why do they put these things so high up? Here, let me. I turned to see it was Kayla. Then she easily grabbed the book and passed it to me. Startled, I peered around to check no one had seen this and spotted two girls giggling and whispering to each other. This was so humiliating. It was bad enough that Kayla was bigger than me, but she was a sporty girl, so she was also stronger than me. One lunchtime, I was struggling to open my bottle of Coke. Suddenly, Kayla appeared, grabbed it off me, and even though I muttered out I wanted to do it, she ignored me and opened it with ease. Then, one night while I was studying, Liam texted me telling me to go check my Insta. There was a picture of me sitting on Kayla's lap in the school garden. What? And then beneath it were loads of comments such as, "Whoa, little baby Evan with She-Hulk Kayla." And one of my friends even said, "Clearly Evan's the wife and Kayla's the husband." No, this couldn't be happening. That afternoon in the school garden, I'd asked Kayla to check my back for an insect bite. But before I could stop her, she'd pulled me onto her lap to check. But some jerk had taken a photo and posted it online saying, "Little Evan is sitting on the lap of his Hulk girlfriend." I was furious, especially with my friend's comment. I mentioned it to Kayla, but she just shrugged and told me they were only messing about and it was no big deal. After that, I didn't want to be around Kayla so much. She just made me feel so small, and I hated being laughed at by the other kids. A few days later, I was running in PE class when I tripped over my own feet and fell so hard onto the ground that I almost fainted. I lay there seeing stars and feeling like an idiot when a load of kids gathered around me. Kayla was also in the sports hall having her training lesson, so she ran over to me and ordered everyone to give me space. Then she bent down and lifted me up in her arms and carried me across the room. This was mortifying. So with the last bit of my energy, I shouted, "Put me down! I'm not a baby!" "Oh, okay. I'm just trying to help you." "I don't need your help. It's embarrassing. It's like you're the man in our relationship. You make me feel inferior." Everyone was gawping at us and whispering. Then Kayla put me down and walked off in silence. She looked upset, and I felt kinda bad. That night, Kayla messaged me asking to meet me in the park. When I got there, she was already waiting for me on a bench. I sat down next to her and said, "Look, Kayla, I'm sorry about before. I was just..." "Stop. I want us to stop. You care too much about what other people think. So what if I'm taller and bigger than you? Who cares? You've never been small or weak in my eyes." I was speechless, and she continued, "You just don't value or appreciate me. I know you avoid me at school. I don't want a boyfriend who's embarrassed to be seen with me. I deserve better than that. So it's over, Evan." Then she stood up and walked off. I watched her go, and even though I wanted to run after her and beg her to forgive me, I didn't. I just sat there all alone, feeling like a fool. That night I thought about it a lot. I knew she was right. I've been a jerk and now I'd lost my amazing, funny, beautiful girlfriend. I shouldn't have let other people's opinions affect me so much because, on reflection, they were irrelevant. I liked her, and she made me happy. So what if she could reach books that I couldn't? Thinking about it, she was actually really helpful to have around. A few days later, I texted Kayla to apologize and asked her for another chance, but she didn't reply. So I arrived at her doorstep with flowers in a box. Kayla opened the door and frowned at me. "I'm an idiot. A great, big, small idiot. But I really like you, Kayla, and I want everyone to know it. I really like Kayla! Please give me another chance, as I'm miserable without you." She stayed silent for a sec, but it felt like an eternity to me. I felt like I could faint until she spoke up. "Yes," she smiled at me. "I'll give you another chance, but don't mess it up this time." I leaped into her arms and hugged her. Yeah, she was holding me in the air, but I didn't care. I was just so happy she was my girlfriend again. After that, I passed her the box which was full. No, not of my trophies and awards, but tubs of strawberry ice cream, her favorite flavor. I might be small and Kayla might be tall, and yeah, okay, maybe this does look funny to some people, but I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. I'm just over the moon, stars, hey, the entire solar system that she's agreed to be my girlfriend again.
Hey, it's Haley. In the last part of my story, I moved to LA with Phil, and after a tricky start, we were finally noticed. Now, we're signed to a record label and have a boss, Dean. My dreams were starting to come true. Well, apart from the fact that Dean was making me feel a little uncomfortable, so I made up an excuse not to go to this A-list party with him. I was on my way home when I heard Dean shouting after me. Oh no, what did he want to say to me? This couldn't be good, could it? I pretended that I hadn't heard him and kept on going. He was so persistent though, and followed after me, continuing to call my name. I ended up turning around and saying, "Dean, what's the matter? If it's not so important now, can we talk later? I really need to get home." I looked down at my watch. He replied, "Wait, Haley, why are you avoiding me?" While I was faltering and didn't know how to answer, he continued, "One minute you're jumping up and down in excitement about the party, but then when Phil said he wasn't going, your mood changed. Is it because you don't want to go with me?" I sputtered in a small voice. "Hey, Haley, are you thinking I have bad thoughts in my mind or something?" He burst out laughing. "Oh no, I'm a happily married man. Come, let's talk." He waved me over to a nearby bench. "You have nothing to worry about. I'm just looking out for you, as I feel like I didn't manage to do that for my sister, Ellen." He gave a thoughtful sigh. "She was a musical genius. Not only was her voice the most powerful one I've ever heard, but she could play multiple instruments. But she didn't tell me about her leukemia. Turns out, she was hiding it for years, as she didn't want us to worry. That was our Ellen, always putting others first." I was stunned and didn't know what to say. I felt so foolish for misunderstanding Dean. There I was, thinking he was being over-familiar, when all he was actually doing was trying to look out for me, because he saw me as a sister. I muttered out, "I'm sorry," while I patted his shoulder to comfort him. Looking up at me, he said, "It's okay. It was a long time ago, and I'm sorry that I made you feel uncomfortable. You have a beautiful voice, and you remind me so much of Ellen. She didn't get a chance to fulfill her dreams. But you can, and I want to help you, as I know that's what Ellen would want me to do." He smiled gently. "So, are you going to come to the party?" he asked. Smiling, I said, "Yes, only Phil the Fool would want to miss this. This is so exciting." I felt so much better now that my misunderstanding with Dean had been resolved, although I did cringe when I thought about how I'd been toward him. Anyway, I had a party outfit to plan. You wouldn't want to be underdressed at events like this, right? The night after, I wore my favorite dress and arrived outside of the company to meet Dean, feeling both excited and nervous. This would be the first time I got to get in contact with real celebrities. I'm talking A-list singers, probably even Hollywood movie stars, people that you would only see on TV. When we arrived at the main entrance to the party, the gate opened automatically. Wow, the driveway alone was bigger than the street I lived on. Then I spotted the mansion and a whole lot of supercars. "Pretty impressive, huh?" Dean grinned at me. I smiled back. You could say that. I was about to attend a lavish party in Beverly Hills, in the biggest mansion I'd ever seen. That's a first, for sure. It was like a dream that you never wanted to end. Dean led me around and introduced me to loads of different people, but suddenly I caught sight of a familiar figure. I tried to look carefully. Wait, wasn't that Clara? Speaking of her, well, I've been trying to get her and Eric out of my mind for a long time, which wasn't easy when they were both super famous. I had to see news about them everywhere, whether it's about what they wore today, what's their schedule next week, or when their stupid duet hit the chart. Trust her to be here. Ugh! But wait, if Clara was here, then would Eric be here too? Oh no, I really didn't want to meet him at this time. I was lost in thought when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Startled, I turned around and saw that it was Dean. He handed me this fancy-looking cocktail and asked me if I was okay. That's when Clara appeared in front of us and started air-kissing Dean. He was about to introduce me to Clara when she stopped him. "Oh, is it you, Haley? Now that you're having a go at being a celebrity, you probably don't remember me anymore." She smirked.
"Huh? You two already know each other?"
Dean asked. "Yeah, we know each other very well, right?" Then she winked at me. "But uh-oh, seems like I picked the wrong moment to bother you. So you two..." Realizing what she was insinuating, Dean said,
"Come on now. You've also met Jane, my wife. Don't make fun of that."
She rolled her eyes and said ironically, "Oh, yeah, I forgot. It's just that you two look so loving. Eric never dares to be so intimate with me in public. I'm so jealous." Then she smirked and walked away. Dean told me not to take any notice of what Clara said, as she's known for being shrewd. Even though I was quite annoyed with Clara's rude words, what bothered me most at that time was not her, but Eric. Why did she intentionally mention his name in front of me? While Dean was talking to some big business types, I stepped out onto the balcony to get some fresh air. From there, I could see clearly the iconic Hollywood sign. Then I turned around to look at the bustling room, where all the well-dressed celebrities were laughing and talking. I took a deep breath and thought to myself, "Look at that, Haley. You did it. This was what you've been dreaming of." That's right. I've worked so hard to get here. It's a brand new chapter now, and the ghosts from the past wouldn't be able to hold me down anymore. That encounter with Clara had actually changed my mindset quite a lot, instead of ruining my night. From then onward, I felt like I was uncovering a new source of motivation. I buried myself in work. I worked for my family, my friends, for fans who were always supporting me, and for myself. And then finally came the day when my hard work paid off. That day, Phil and I were going through some demo tracks to pick out one to be our next single, when suddenly, my phone rang. It was Dean. He said that Phil and I had been invited to perform at Blue Moon Festival. Oh my God, this was incredible! It's the famous Blue Moon that I've watched and read about for all my life. I'd get to stand on the same stage my idols had performed on. What could be better than that? I was so excited, I jumped up and down and then hugged Phil. However, my mood dampened when I found out who else was performing there. Eric! It felt like my heart had stopped beating for a few seconds as I stared at the laptop screen, emotionlessly. Phil seemed to realize that there was something wrong. He immediately looked at the lineup and was quiet at first. Then he said,
"Haley, I get it. You know, we don't have to do this festival."
It's true that even though it had been a long time, I still felt a pang of sadness whenever I thought about Eric. However, I couldn't turn this opportunity down. That wouldn't be fair on Phil, or on myself. So I smiled at Phil and said, "It's okay. I wouldn't miss it for the world." D-Day arrived. I was super excited and also terrified that I felt like I was gonna puke, which would have been bad, as I was in a swanky van en route there. My nerves were partly because I was going to perform in front of the largest audience ever, but also because I would have to be in the same place as Eric. I shook my head to shatter that thought and reassured myself that with so many artists, the chance of me having to see him again was very low. After an amazing performance, I felt electric. I'd done it. I was so proud of myself and of Phil. We were the dream team. We were walking backstage when I felt someone pull on my arm. I turned around and saw that it was Eric. Without saying a word, I pushed him away and carried on, but he once again pulled on my arm. Phil turned back, and on seeing what was happening, he immediately intervened.
"Hey, let go of her!"
Eric said.
"I just want to talk to Haley in private."
Phil said sharply.
"Just say it out loud. The two of us are one now. Haley's story is mine too."
Annoyed, Eric replied, "It's not your place to say that. You're nothing to her. Haley, please, listen to me." The situation seemed to be growing more and more complicated, and the last thing any of us needed was to cause a scene here. So I told Phil to go to the green room first. Then I turned to Eric, and in a cold voice I said, "Okay, Eric, what do you want?"
Hi, my name is Happiness. You're impressed with my name, right? My dad gave me that name. And yeah, as you can guess, he put a lot of hopes and dreams in me. I'm now 18 years old, and tomorrow I will fly to Massachusetts to start my college. My parents are preparing a farewell party for me downstairs. I have never left my hometown and been away from my family, so this is such an occasion. As I'm packing my belongings for college, a flood of memories come to mind. You see, when I was a kid, my family was dirt poor. We lived in an old, dilapidated house on the outskirts of Selma in Alabama. I remember we would buy a chicken at the beginning of the month, and my parents would make it last the whole month. I didn't realize we were poor, though. In fact, at that point, I was just a happy, carefree little girl, but that wouldn't last. My mom worked as a cleaner for a rich family, but they treated her terribly, and she barely earned enough money to even take the bus there. My dad was a lorry driver, and so he was away a lot, delivering goods to other states. Every weekend when he came home, I'd stand out on the porch as soon as I saw his big truck driving up the dusty road. I'd run out there and jump up and down. The best part was that he always brought me a little present, like a piece of candy that he'd save for me, or a small toy. They weren't valuable gifts, but they meant the world to me. One time he came home, and I ran up to him and said, "Daddy, yesterday Jeannie's dad brought her a chocolate egg back from his trip. It even had a toy inside. I want one too." My dad looked confused. Then he said he'd heard of them, and they were called Kinder Eggs. And then, with loving eyes and a smile, he promised he'd find me one, no matter how hard it would be, even if it was the last thing he did. The next weekend, I raced out to the street and could barely contain my excitement as I waited for him to come home. I waited and waited, but still he didn't arrive. I started to get worried, so I asked my mom where he was. She said, "Oh, sweetie, he's on his way. Why don't you go to sleep, and as soon as you wake up, he'll be here." There was no way I could sleep. All I could think about was getting a chocolate egg with a toy inside. I'd almost dozed off when I heard his voice. I ran downstairs and jumped into his arms, hugging him. "I missed you, Daddy," I told him, and he laughed and said, "I missed you too, sweetie pie." Then I said, "Where is it? Did you get me a chocolate egg?" I eagerly asked. Then his face dropped. He said, "Sorry, baby. I was working late, so I didn't have time to buy one. But I promise I'll bring you two next time to make up for it. Okay?" But this wasn't okay. I was so disappointed. I pushed him away from me and burst into tears, saying, You promised me!" I'd never cried like that before over something so small, but at the time it felt like such a big deal, and my dad looked confused to see me so upset. At that moment, my mom came through and saw me. She immediately understood everything, then started to comfort my dad. "Come on, honey, take a rest. You've worked yourself too hard recently. Come eat. You're so skinny these days." This just made me more annoyed. I was the one who needed comforting, not my dad. So I shouted at my mom, "Mommy, Daddy didn't keep his promise." But my mom just ignored me, and so I stormed back up the stairs, crying all the way. After I'd calmed down, my mom came to my room and said, "Happiness, your dad works so hard, and you should just be happy that he's home safely. I know he didn't bring you what you wanted, but he will next time, okay? In the meantime, I'll make your favorite cupcakes every day." "Every day? Wow, okay," I said to her. And she really did. She made me cupcakes every day, and I was so happy. After a few days, I said to her, "Mommy, I like you more than Daddy. I don't even love him anymore because he broke his promise." My mom just looked at me and said, "Oh, Happiness, you don't know what you're saying. One day when you grow up, you'll understand that everything your dad does is for you. He loves you so much." The next weekend rolled around, and as usual, I ran outside to wait for my dad. Just like the week before, the sun set and still he was nowhere to be seen. I was about to start crying when I noticed a man running towards our front door. My mom appeared and he said something, and suddenly my mom started panicking. She called out to me and said we had to go to Grandpa's place immediately. I had no idea what was happening, but for the next month, my grandpa took care of me because my parents didn't come home. I missed them so much, and whenever I asked when they were coming to get me, my grandpa just said, "Happiness, they're busy working. Don't you worry. Just stay here and enjoy your time with me." Eventually, I got used to it. Then one morning, Grandpa woke me up early and said it was time to go home. I was so excited that I kept on singing happily. As we pulled up outside our house, my heart started beating faster. I was home! Then a shadow appeared in the doorway, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was my mom and dad, but my dad was in a wheelchair. My mom looked so thin and tired, and my dad had no legs. What had happened? I looked to Grandpa to reassure me, but he looked as nervous as I did. Then in my little voice I said, "Daddy, where are your legs?" He smiled at me and with his usual loving eyes said, "They got hurt. But hey, what do you think of my wheelchair?" He let me sit on his lap, and Mom pushed us around, and it was so cool. I was way too young to understand what was really going on. All I remember was how many people kept visiting to check on Dad, and that I finally got to try a chocolate egg. That same day, a doctor came to visit, and after he checked on my dad, he came over and patted my head. Then he pulled a chocolate egg out of his bag, and then another one, and another one. 3 chocolate eggs! I couldn't believe it. I was shaking with excitement. The doctor said the gift was from my dad, and that I should thank him. I ran to my dad and said, "Thank you, Daddy." He looked like he was going to cry, and I asked if he was okay, and he just smiled and said, "I'm happy because you're happy. That's all that matters to me." For the first time in my life, I got to try a chocolate egg, and it was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. And the best part was that inside there was a toy. After I opened and ate all 3, I just wanted more. I kept asking my dad when I could get more, and he just laughed. And then I thought, maybe if I studied really hard and was a good girl, I'd get some more. So that's what I did. I focused on my study, and one day I won a medal at school for winning a math contest. I was so excited to show my parents and assumed they'd give me a chocolate egg as a reward, but that's not what happened. They congratulated me, but said it wasn't possible for them to get me another chocolate egg. I don't know why, but this made me so angry. I cried, and I even threw my bag at them, and this made my mom super mad. She scolded me so much that I was scared and ran out the house and went to my grandpa's house. I cried and told him everything, and my grandpa said, "Happiness, the reason your mom got so mad is because she is under too much pressure and has to work so hard to look after you. Now, your dad can't work, so she's in charge, and it's a lot for her to deal with." Then he told me what happened to my dad, and it changed my life forever. That day when my dad was out doing his deliveries, he got an opportunity to do some overtime, which he jumped at the chance to do so he could buy me my chocolate eggs. On his way home, he stopped to buy them for me, and then because he was so tired, as he was leaving the store, he got hit by a drunk driver. He was hit so hard he lost both his legs. I couldn't believe it. How could I have been so selfish? If it weren't for me demanding a chocolate egg, my dad would still have his legs. I felt so terrible. And so the next day, when I won some candy for the other math contests, I came home and went to my parents. "Mommy, Daddy, I'm so sorry. I want you to have these. You always do your best to give me the sweetest life, and so I wanted to make yours sweeter too." That probably sounds a bit deep for a 6-year-old to say, right? Well, my grandpa taught me that one. My parents were so moved that they almost cried when they hugged me. And even though I didn't understand it at the time, I do now. And it's so true. It's taken me a while, but now that I'm about to move out, I finally understand the life my parents have given me and how sweet it has been. Through this channel, I'd like to send some words to my parents. Mom, Dad, if you're watching this, I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done for me. Now it's my turn to work hard and make you proud. No matter how hard life gets, I'll persevere, just like you both have, because I'm your happiness.
Would you ever let yourself become so wrapped up in hatred that you change your entire life to get revenge on someone? Well, that's exactly what I did, and it didn't exactly go to plan. I'm Clara, and I'm 25 years old. It all started 5 years ago when my boyfriend Jason went to study abroad in France. We were so in love at that time, and it wasn't easy being apart, but we coped surprisingly well. Jason even promised me we'd get married when he got back, but after a few short months of him being away, he started growing distant. He no longer called me every day, and he barely even replied to my texts. I thought maybe he was just too busy and stressful to deal with his new life, while struggling with missing me. So I decided to do something wild and fly to Paris to surprise him on his upcoming birthday. I hadn't really thought about it. I just excitedly got on the flight and taken a taxi to his apartment. But, well, the moment I saw him walking into the lobby, I instantly regretted it. There Jason was, but he wasn't alone. He was hugging and kissing some other girl, and she even went upstairs with him. I felt my blood boil, and I wanted to scream, but instead, I just left. I was so upset, but I was also angry. How could he betray me like that? Going a long way just to see my boyfriend betraying me right in front of my eyes was a bad thing, and I didn't think life could get any worse. But I was wrong. Things were about to get much worse. After leaving his place, I booked myself into a nearby hostel and cried myself to sleep. The next moment, I was waking up to a burning smell. Oh God, the hostel was on fire! I was lucky to make it out of there alive, but I was badly burned and left with a huge scar on my face. There I was, heartbroken and burnt to a crisp in a foreign country, where I knew no one and didn't speak the language. I'd never been so lonely and ugly in my life. As I looked in the mirror, all I felt was anger and resentment towards Jason. He destroyed my life, and at all costs, I would make him pay for it. After I'd recovered, I got on the plane and flew back to the USA. That's when I started plotting my revenge. I had a few things up my sleeve, but first things first. Plastic surgery. So, as soon as I graduated, I got myself a full face rework. I even changed my name, moved to a new apartment, and lived with a new identity. My life was miserable enough, so now all I wanted was to start all over again. And it worked. After the surgery, I turned into a completely different person, just like I'd wanted. And what's more, I was even more beautiful than before the accident. I felt incredible and couldn't wait to start living again. Of course, I had to work my ass off to pay off my plastic surgery, but it was worth it, wasn't it? More than that was also how I tried my best to build a career for myself. Jason would regret cheating on me for the rest of his life, that's for sure. And as planned, after 3 years of working hard, I eventually got promoted to a management position in the construction company I worked for, and became a beautiful, successful woman that many people admired. At the same time, a few of my friends mentioned that Jason had finally returned from Paris and was now working for a big architectural firm. I almost laughed when I heard the company's name. That was our new partner company. Oh, things were about to get fun. My friends also told me that he'd brought his French girlfriend back to the USA with him and that they were getting married soon. What? He was about to get married? They seemed so happy together, huh? No wonder that for all these years, he hadn't tried to contact me once. After I caught him cheating, I just disappeared. I could have been dead for all he knew. But he didn't seem to care. This made me hate him even more. There was no way a traitor could live happily like that. I couldn't wait any longer. It was time to put my plan into action. So I told my boss I'd work on the project with Jason's firm. At least this way, I'd have an excuse to approach him. At that first meeting, I made sure I looked as beautiful as possible and waited with bated breath. Of course, Jason didn't recognize me. And well, would you believe it? He kept looking at me and flirting with me. I found it hilarious, and so kept flirting back, and eventually he got the hint and asked me out. What a jerk! Now I understood why I was abandoned in the past. Even when he already had his fiancée, he could still flirt leisurely with others. His poor fiancée! I kept playing along, and even made plans to befriend his fiancée, Valerie. I knew she hung out in a certain cafe, so one day I went there and accidentally bumped into her, dropping water all over her gorgeous outfit. I kept apologizing and told her I'd pay to get it dry cleaned, and eventually we started chatting and hit it off. We exchanged numbers, and I asked if she'd like to go shopping sometime, which she agreed to. This was way too easy. A few days later, we went shopping, and it didn't take long before she started confiding in me about how lonely she was, and that other than her boyfriend, she didn't know anyone here. I smiled sweetly and told her I'd happily be her best friend. At the same time, Jason and I were dating. I pretended to fall for him, even though inside I was furious at him. I even told him I'd share some confidential work documents with him if he pampered me and treated me like a princess. He seemed totally in love with me and spent all his spare time taking me out to dinner and buying me expensive gifts. It seemed like he was no longer interested in Valerie. Obviously, Valerie came to me and told me that she was very sad because the wedding was coming soon, but her fiancé was just cold and acting weird. On the one hand, I comforted and encouraged her, but on the other hand, I seduced Jason and took most of his money. He'd even put my name on the house contract, so technically, I owned his place. You know, I wanted Jason to feel the pain of being betrayed by the person he trusted. Then one day, Valerie called me in tears and said she suspected her boyfriend was seeing someone else. I asked her what her boyfriend's name was and where he worked, and said she didn't need to worry. I'd help her find out. A few days later, I sent Valerie a few photos of him cheating with me, but obviously, I hid my face. However, it was just enough evidence to make her suffer. Then I told Valerie that it looked like her boyfriend was working with this other girl on a project, and that Valerie could get her revenge by destroying the project. That way, he wouldn't be able to work with this other girl anymore. Valerie totally fell for it. It was insane. The very next day, I heard from my colleagues that Jason's crazy fiancée had destroyed the final layout for the design of the two companies' project. She spilled water on his laptop and threw it onto the ground. While the deadline was coming, it was too late to start it over. Apparently, Jason's boss was fuming and fired him immediately. This contract was worth millions of dollars, and he'd just ruined everything. I had to give it to Valerie. She didn't even think about it. That's how dumb she was. Served Jason right. Finally, karma had come and bitten him in the ass. That evening, I went over to their house. Jason now has no job, no money, and he was about to lose his fiancée and his house, too. I knocked on the door, and when Valerie opened it, she was shocked to see me, but not as shocked as she was about to become. Jason saw me and looked like he was going to pass out. "Surprise!" I said. "Hi, Jason." At this, Valerie looked confused and said, "Wait, do you two know each other?" I just laughed and said, "We sure do, Valerie. In fact, I'm the other woman who he is cheating on you with. And that's not all. I'm actually Jason's ex." Then I turned to Jason. "That's right, Jason. It's me, Clara. Valerie, when he came to Paris, he was dating me, and then he cheated on me with you, so I've been getting my sweet revenge." Both of them looked completely stunned, and instead of shouting at me, they started fighting with each other. Valerie was screaming. "How could you?" Jason shouted back. "You're crazy! If you hadn't ruined my laptop, things wouldn't have been like this." "Oh, really? If you hadn't cheated on me, I wouldn't have done that," Valerie said, while bursting out crying. Pretty soon, she found out that the house belonged to me now, and all of his money, and that's when all hell broke loose. I just stood there, admiring how great my revenge had played out. Eventually, they broke up with each other, and I decided to kick them out of the house. So my cherished revenge plan for the past few years has been successful. However, there was just one problem. The price I paid for it wasn't small. When I showed up at work the next day, everyone was whispering about me, saying the project I'd been working on had been a complete failure, and that it was all because I seduced the guy from our partner firm, even when he was about to marry his fiancée. It was a disaster. My reputation was ruined. I couldn't handle everyone being against me, so I resigned. I decided to spend some time at home for a while, trying to clear my head. I didn't get it. I'd spent years plotting my revenge, and now that it had finally been a success, why did I feel so bad? I'd been so caught up in ruining Jason's life. I hadn't thought how it would affect my life, too. I'd been delusional. Above all, the joy and satiety of watching the two of them move out of the house was just temporary, and what remained after that was just a feeling of emptiness. What had I been doing? I was just ruining people's lives, especially with Valerie. She was so innocent in all of this. How could I have been so cruel? Then one day, as I was walking down the street, I saw her at the bus stop, and she looked so sad and thin, and it tormented me. That poor girl didn't deserve this. I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. I had to apologize, so I raced across the street. But by the time I got there, the bus had come, and she had gone. I decided to call her instead. I asked if we could talk, and at first, she refused. But once I said sorry and told her how terrible I felt about everything, she agreed to meet me. I was holding the keys to her old house, and as she walked towards me, I handed them over. She was surprised, but then I started to explain. Valerie, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. It's just that Jason broke my heart, and for years, all I thought about was destroying his life the way he destroyed mine. I didn't realize you were so sweet, and now I see how awful I was to you. You don't deserve any of this. You trusted me, and I completely betrayed you. At first, Valerie didn't say anything. Then she started shouting at me, saying she'd thought of me as her best friend, and that she felt so pathetic for trusting me. At this point, I burst into tears. I was a monster. The minute I started crying, something changed in Valerie. She hugged me. I couldn't believe it. After everything I'd done to her, she still wanted to hug me. We were there hugging and crying, and yep, finally something good had come out of all this mess. I had a friend, and very quickly, this friend will become my best friend for sure. You guys, honestly, I don't recommend wasting your time on revenge. I threw away so many years of my life obsessing over hurting Jason, and in the end, it just hurt me and poor innocent Valerie. From my own experience, I just want to tell you that always be the bigger person and live for yourself, not for others.
Hey, Alex! I felt someone tap on my shoulder. I turned around to see who it was, and it was Roxy, my crush, who also happened to be the most beautiful girl in the world. I figured I must have been in her way, so I quickly mumbled out, "Sorry," and stepped aside. But out of my surprise, she smiled at me and said, "So, a little birdie told me you like me? You know, I think it's cute you haven't made a move on me yet, not like most of the guys around here." I stared at her open-mouthed. Was I dreaming? I pinched myself to check. Nope, this was real. So I nodded my head and muttered out, yeah? My friend's having a party at their frat house on Wednesday. You want to come? Before I could reply, her friend Luke appeared, and grinning, he said, "Yeah, you just gotta come to this party." Roxy hit his arm while giving him a dirty look, then smiled at me. "So it's at number 19, starts at 9 p.m. I'll see you then?" I nodded in response, and she said, "Great, see you there." Then she winked at me before she walked off. So yeah, I'm Alex, your average second-year college student. And this is the story about how my crush tried to lure me into a seriously sinister trap. I guess I'm a normal guy. I'm not as rich and popular as the kids from the frat houses are. Instead, my room is in the regular dorms, and although I'm not ugly or unpopular or anything, I'm easily overlooked. So I kept my crush on Roxy a secret because she was way out of my league. She was so beautiful, this was crazy. How did she even find out that I liked her? I couldn't believe that she'd asked me out. This was mad. At first, I felt like the luckiest guy ever. But then as I watched Roxy walk back to her friends, I noticed them giggling, except for this one girl called Sophie. Meanwhile, Luke was making everyone high-five him. He was always a little odd, and he spoke to people in strange ways. Then I caught Sophie's eye, and she gave me a look that said, "Don't." Then she promptly looked away. Her jerky boyfriend Jack had his arm around her shoulder and was tugging on one of her trademark pigtails as he glugged back his drink. I had no idea what she saw in him. But what had her look been about? Back in my dorm, I discussed it with my roommate Ben, and he said it sounded like a setup. As much as I wanted it to be legit, my gut instinct was also saying that it was too good to be true. So the night of the party, I decided to take a look out my dorm window, as it's in the perfect location to get a clear view of the frat houses. I counted the houses down to number 19, then I took out my binoculars, for which I used for field research studies, to take a closer look. The house had a large rainbow pride flag hanging from the two windows. This made me wonder why Roxy would want to go to a gay party. I saw a lot of feminine dressed men, and the only two girls that I could spot were far from attractive. And it seemed like they were a couple. And then there was Luke in the front yard holding 2 drinks and looking around like he was waiting for someone. Where was Roxy? I decided to check her social media to see if she'd posted anything. And I noticed she'd left her location open. She was in a nightclub, Diego's. That was strange. So I gave the party a miss, and instead Ben and I went to a student bar. I told him about it, and he said it sounded like I dodged a bullet. The next day I was sitting with Ben and some of my other friends in the canteen when Roxy stormed over to me and yelled out, "How dare you stand me up? Who do you think you are?" Luke appeared and said, "Yeah, why not show?" I just shrugged and said, "Roxy, I know you weren't there. Your phone location's public. You were at Diego's." She hesitated, then said, Yeah, my friend borrowed my phone. But what you did was so creepy, you stalker." As if. Roxy was never without her phone, so I wasn't buying her story. This whole thing didn't make any sense, so I sort of mouthed out, "Whatever, Roxy," then carried on eating my lunch. After that, she started making my life a living hell. She told everyone that I was stalking her, so random students started coming up to me and telling me to leave her alone. Then someone covered the dorm corridors in leaflets with a picture of my face and the word "stalker" written across them. I knew Roxy was behind it. It was so weird. But Luke was worse. One time after class, he sneaked up on me, grabbed my arm, and said, "Hey Alex, why you bail on my party?" I told him that I saw the party from a distance and it wasn't my thing, so he replied, "Hey, you got a probs with me being gay?" I shook my head and told him I didn't, but he still wouldn't let go of my arm. I was relieved when he finally let go of me, and I hurried back to my dorm. On the way, I spotted Sophie sitting outside on the shared bathroom. Hang on, why was she in the flood of tears? I asked her if she was okay, but she told me to go away. Although I didn't want to put my nose where it shouldn't be. But I wasn't heartless, so I left her my bottle of water before I walked off. I said, "If you want to talk about it, I'm here for you." I was unlocking my dorm room when I heard someone cough behind me. I turned around to see Sophie standing there. She thanked me for the water and she said she wanted to talk. I led her into my room and she sat on my bed. And staring at her feet, she said in tears, "I caught Jack and Roxy by the locker rooms, but when I confronted them about it, they just shooed me away." I sat down next to Sophie and hugged her. This was horrible. It looks like I've been so wrong about Roxy. She wasn't my dream girl at all. Instead, she was a nightmare. Sophie continued, "It gets worse. Roxy stole my assignment and submitted it as her own. It's due tomorrow and I don't have the time to write a new one." She started crying again. I passed her a tissue and said, "We'll sort this out. There's no way she's getting away with it. That's horrible." So I told her to send an email to the college dean and to her course tutor explaining what happened. She'd attached the original assignment and all the notes she'd written about it. They both got back to us within minutes and said that they would look into this. Sophie looked so delighted, but then suddenly her smile dropped, and she fiddled with one of her pigtails as she said, "Alex, there's something I need to tell you. Please don't hate me." Then she told me how the party Roxy had invited me to had been a trap. Roxy found out I had a crush on her, and she was embarrassed that an average guy like me dared to have feelings toward her. And she was adamant she needed to teach me a lesson. So that's when Luke said he would help, as he wanted to add me to his collection, so they hatched a plan. Roxy invited me to the party, and Luke was waiting for me with a spiked drink. Apparently, this was Roxy's way of silencing me, and making sure I didn't look at her in the same way ever again. Whoa, this was so dark. I shivered at the thought of what could have been. It was terrifying. Sophie also told me that she begged Roxy not to do this, but she got her friends to hold her down. Then she told her that if she intervened, they'd make her suffer. I comforted Sophie and told her that it wasn't her fault. I knew I couldn't just stay quiet on this, as they could do this to some poor other guy who dared to have a crush on her. So with Sophie's help, we wrote a letter to the dean and to the college security about what had happened. This wasn't going to be taken lying down. Sophie was terrified that Roxy and her friends would come after her, so I invited her back to my hometown for the weekend to get away from everyone and let things cool down. When we arrived back at college, news spread that Roxy had been expelled for stealing another student's work. As for Luke, the cops raided his frat house and found loads of banned substances hidden in there. It was so serious that it went to court, and they ended up in jail. As for Jack, he tried to guilt-trip Sophie as to why she should get Roxy expelled for dumb reasons, but she stopped talking to him anyway. I often think back to the night of the party and what could have been. My life would have been ruined, and what for? All because I dared to have a crush on a beautiful girl. I say good riddance. Some good has come out of this whole mess. Sophie and I grew closer and started dating. Now we've both graduated, and that's not all. We have 2 amazing kids together. I love my beautiful family with all my heart, and I just want to protect them from all the bad in this world. So in short, I don't think that just because you're beautiful, rich, and popular, that you get away with doing whatever you please. Regardless of age, sex, looks, and so on, everyone deserves to be treated with respect and compassion.
Why do we have to study logarithms? Will they help us with stockbroking? Surely not. Why suddenly create the x and then force us to find it? And why do I have to prove that it's an isosceles triangle? I see clearly that it is. Duh! Then I received the note back saying, "What are you two talking about?" I just figured that another kid had intercepted it. So with my eyes still glued to my level 3692 of Candy Crush, I scrawled back, "Keep your nose out of my business," and then handed the paper over without looking. Ahem. But your business is taking place in my class. I slowly looked up and saw that it was my teacher. Oh, dang. Busted again. Looking over, I saw Brett with his big guilty face. Ugh, he should have been more careful. Okay, you. And you. Out. You're probably wondering how I'm such a pro at this pose. Well, it's because I've done it 1,000 times. And that serious woman over there is Mrs. Megan, my math teacher. I swear, she totally has it in for me. Okay, let me tell you the story. Once upon a time, there was a girl who, due to an unexpected accident with a trash can and an ill-placed skateboard, ended up arriving a teensy bit late for her exam. But the teacher refused to let her in, and also failed her. Grrr. Yeah, that girl was me, Lexi. Thus, from that moment forth, she became my arch enemy. So, during her boring lecture, I threw a paper plane at the board and said, "Miss, you've spelled arithmetic wrong. I suppose spelling is a bit hard for a numbers person like you. It's okay." Clearly my comment got to her, as during that same class, she picked on me to graph a function. Easy peasy. So I created a masterpiece that made her eyes roll, and the whole class found it hilarious. And as expected, she gave me a lengthy lecture on my childish behavior, and even threatened to call my parents. Poof! Yeah, good luck with that, as unless it involved business, then my parents were practically impossible to reach. Besides, I was just having a laugh. Mrs. Megan needed to lighten up. So I secretly stuck a piece of paper saying "free hugs" on her back. I lurked behind a tree and watched as all these people surrounded her. She looked so bewildered as she tried to navigate past them while having no idea what was going on. The good old days. Suddenly, Brett patted my shoulder and told me 30 minutes had passed and we needed to go back to class. My butt hadn't even touched my chair when I heard a patronizing voice say, "You shouldn't act like that." Ugh, that's Faye, the teacher's pet and a real pick-me girl. Every time the teacher asks a question, she wriggles her arm in the air and squeaks out, "Me! Me! Mrs. Megan only likes her because she always laughs at her boring jokes. Oh well, I may have no proof, but in my experience, Faye's definitely not as innocent as she looks. Don't say I'm jealous, 'cause I'm 100% not. You probably think I hate school, but it's still way better than my so-called home. Ugh. At least school could be amusing, while my home life consisted of Mom and Dad locked away in their office 24/7. I can't remember the last time either of them cooked dinner. So takeaway it is. So I'm texting Ben, my super sexy BF. He's been studying in France, and he's back today. I've missed him so much, but unfortunately, I couldn't pick him up from the airport because of, school. And tonight, he has a family party, but we're meeting up tomorrow. Yay! Let me see your face, sweetie. I miss you. You know what? Today, that teacher gave me detention again. Really? She messed with the wrong one, didn't she? Definitely. I will retaliate tomorrow. She'd better watch out. Okay, but don't end up in after-school detention, as I want to see you. My mom's also a teacher, but she's not that much. Oh, by the way, she's here. You want to say hello? Yeah, sure. Ben, it gets on my nerves whenever I think of that Before I had a chance to finish my words, a person popped up on the screen. Mrs. Megan! Lexi? OMG! We both gave each other stunned, open-mouthed stares. It looked like the screen had frozen. Literally! Then just when I didn't think it could get any worse, suddenly a familiar voice broke the silence. Oh, Ben has a girlfriend? Let me see her. Huh? That's Faye! Oh my days, this is too much to process. My two enemies were in the same frame. Shocked, I ended the call. Right after, I received a text from Ben saying, "Don't worry, my mother may look super serious, but she's kind. And the girl is Faye, my neighbor. We've known each other since childhood, and she's cool." This was so crazy. Now I'd have to face them both every day, knowing that they're associated with my BF. Oh, the future is as dark as night. And yeah, this is the beginning of the series thusly entitled Living with My Future Mother-in-Law and My BF's Annoying Female Best Friend. And since then, things at school turned weird. For our class Halloween event, which had a Toy Story theme, Mrs. Megan was in charge of handing out the parts. Faye was Bo Peep, and she had this really cute outfit. While me, I was stuck as Mrs. Potato Head. My outfit was so lame, and one of my googly eyes kept on falling off. Ugh! It was so embarrassing, but I couldn't say anything. I couldn't mess with her anymore, as I still wanted to be with her son. Ugh. Worse still, math class became an endurance test. I was so sick of being compared to that goody two-shoes Faye. Lexi, if you spent more time studying and less time painting your nails, you'd be a top student like Faye. Poof! Faye caught on to what was going on and also started playing tricks on me. One time in class, when I was dozing and Mrs. Megan was correcting the homework, I overheard, "This symbol shows that A is not equal to B." Faye then turned around and whispered, "Just like you're not equal to me. And you don't deserve my Ben either." What? Ben is mine, not hers. I bared my teeth and was about to say something when that brat started pretending to cry, saying that I was picking on her. Out! Mrs. Megan came to us with burning eyes. We were walking out when in a sympathetic tone she added, "Faye, you stay." I returned to my meditating pose, but, I couldn't shake off my anger. How unfair! Later, when it was lunchtime, Faye walked over to me with a cup of Coke, saying it was a peace offering, and that she was sorry for earlier. This was confusing, but whatever. I took it and was about to take a sip when Brett rushed over waving his arms about. "Lexi, stop!" I saw Faye put soy sauce in it. I was just a second away from yelling at her when Mrs. Megan appeared. I smiled smugly, thinking Faye would finally get into trouble. But to my surprise, Mrs. Megan took a sip of the drink and tried to keep a neutral face as she replied, "There's nothing wrong with it." Really? They went that far to cover up for each other? Whatever. I had a date with Ben tonight to prepare for anyway. That night as planned, I arrived at Ben's house with a somewhat wilting pot plant for Mrs. Megan. I was kinda excited to finally have a cooked meal. Only, when I walked into the kitchen, I couldn't smell anything cooking. Mrs. Megan appeared and rubbing her hand said, "Lexi, you don't mind cooking, do you? It's just been a long week of drawing diagrams. My hand kinda aches." Seeing the situation, Ben immediately came to help, but she reminded him that he'd agreed to fix a pipe or something. To be honest, I'd never touched a frying pan before. But I mean, how hard could it be? I'd make pancakes, though it's not really suitable for dinner, but I'd seen them on a 5-minute crafts and they were clearly a breeze to make. Only, it didn't go to plan. In situations like this, it's important not to panic. But, yeah, I panicked. I needed a plan B. Quick! In a rush, I threw away all the evidence of the failed pancakes and ordered food online. After all, thanks to my workaholic parents, this was my forte. I instructed the delivery person to come to the back door, so Ben and Mrs. Megan would be none the wiser. Expectedly, at the very first bite, Ben and my mother-in-law praised me profusely for my food, and Ben even joked that I should join the next season of Master Chef. Yo, I will rate this restaurant 5 stars for sure. Mrs. Megan suddenly dropped her spoon, so I quickly bent down to pick it up, only she leaned down and whispered sarcastically, "I order from Sydney's too. Their sauces are divine." Oh, busted! Then, halfway through the night, this man showed up and apologized for being late. Turns out he was Jim, Faye's father. But Faye wasn't coming over as she was out with friends. Happy days! I watched Mrs. Megan and him touch a tissue box at the same time by mistake, and then blushed? Huh? Oh, I get it. She liked him. Now it made sense why she was always sucking up to Faye. "Have you thought about remarrying?" I asked Jim innocently. To the waiting eyes of me, as well as Mrs. Megan, he hesitantly answered, I don't think Faye would like that." Mrs. Megan glumly stared down at the floor. Okay, so I actually felt kinda sorry for her. Besides, matchmaking has always been my hobby, so I decided to help her. I knew that Faye was at a party on Saturday night, so I decided this was the perfect opportunity to play Cupid. I told Mrs. Megan that Jim had something to tell her, so meet him at the Golden Reef restaurant at 7 p.m. Then I told Jim the same. I stood behind a column and watched them share their starter, and then give each other gooey-eyed glances. Then Jim reached out and took Mrs. Megan's hand. They were looking at each other passionately when Faye suddenly rushed in from nowhere and angrily slammed her bag on the table. "So this is it? My teacher? And my dad? For real?" Faye, why are you here?" Jim stuttered.
"No one can ever replace Mom!"
Then she turned to a dumbfounded-looking Mrs. Megan.
"Turns out you were only being nice to me to get my dad. You're fake. Stay away from us."
Mrs. Megan covered her face with her hands, then quickly left. Geez, Faye was brutal. And however annoying Mrs. Megan was, she didn't deserve that.
"You!"
Faye shouted. Uh-oh, her gaze fixed on me.
"It figures you'd be behind this. Keep your big nose out of our family business and start caring about yours instead. Guess this is what lack of parental care does to a kid."
I stared at her speechless. Those words should have driven me mad, but for some reason, I only felt sad. And so guilty. I really just meant well. So, first thing at school the next day, I swallowed my pride and went to Mrs. Megan's classroom. where she looked lost in thought as she marked homework. I coughed to clear my throat, then said, "Miss, I'm sorry. I honestly was trying to help, but now I realize I should have minded my own business. I'm also sorry for being a jerk in your class." She was silent at first, then replied, "It's okay, as I've come to realize that you and I aren't so different. We both have complications in the way of finding love. Guess it's really not easy to get approval from your parents' family, huh?" She smiled and gently stroked my hair before continuing, "You're such a smart and kind girl, and I always knew you could do better in class, that I must have been too harsh on you. I'm sorry, too." I smiled back at her, and at that moment, I felt like all of our previous conflicts melted away. And I realized that I shouldn't neglect my studies. Instead, I should work hard to become the best version of myself. So, with a lot of hard work, I went from trailing at the bottom of the class to reaching the top spot, even overtaking Faye. Ha! Speaking of Faye, she was still ignoring both me and Mrs. Megan, and never put her hand up in class anymore. But then a rainbow flame experience in the chem lab changed things. Everyone ran out of there when the curtain caught on fire, except for a terrified Faye. Luckily, Mrs. Megan rushed inside to rescue her just in time, and covered her with a jacket as she led her to safety. After that, Faye realized that Mrs. Megan is a good person who cares about both her and Jim. So, through blurry eyes, Faye sobbed out, "Thank you so much, and sorry, I was too childish. Please forgive me." A few months later. So, yeah, you see, my wing woman plan worked. And now I have a second family, a really big one. But you know what's the best thing? That is, I no longer have to order food online anymore, 'cause I will stick to here, and my mother-in-law will cook for me.
Hey! Been trying to find you at school today. I have big news, and it's bad. Real bad! Don't leave me hanging. Mom says we're defo moving to California by the end of the month. What? No way! That's a 2-day drive from here. Yeah, I know. But Mom's marrying David.
The same David that's scared of spiders, cockroaches, and everything?
Yeah, that guy. He's been trying to get her attention for ages, sending her flowers, playing the guitar on her porch. Then last week, he even climbed up the oak tree so he could hand her flowers through the bedroom window.
Okay, that's kind of creepy.
Ew. Tell me about it. But you know, the worst part is, I have to transfer to another school. No. Lisa couldn't move away. Who would I sit with at lunch? Who would I watch corny movies with? Ugh, we've been besties for years. We couldn't just be separated like this. No one would ever understand me like she did. We were like two halves of a whole. Her dad had passed away, so she only had her mom, while I only had my dad. And yep, that's my amazing dad. It's been just me and him for the past 10 years. I still remember that afternoon when my mom took her suitcase and left with another man. After that, me and Dad moved back here, to our hometown, New Hampshire. It's only when I got a little older that I found out Mom and her lover scammed Dad out of everything. So Dad's been working his butt off to open his own repair garage to provide for us both ever since. It isn't fair. My dad's a hero, and he deserves to be with a better woman. Hold on. Yes, he deserves a better one. And who wouldn't be better than Lisa's mom? I needed to tell Lisa about my plan right now, so I immediately ran to my room and phoned her. Girl, I have the most genius plan ever to keep you and your mom here with me. Please, I'm all ears. Anything. I really don't want to move to Cali. Okay, listen. Let's set your mom up with my dad. He's a good guy, and that means we'll be sisters. We both squealed excitedly. Lisa always wanted to have a dad, a nice one,
Not that David creep. Ugh! I could see the envy in her eyes when I spoke about the funny pranks I played on my dad. Well, in contrast, my heart ached whenever she told me about the girly pamper days she had with her mom. Okay, first, research is important. We spent all night looking up their horoscopes, name astrology calculator, and even physiognomy. Whoa, they're a 98% match! But hey, nothing is perfect, right? Me and Lisa would make up for the missing 2%. The next day, we were both zombies due to the lack of sleep. But at least a proper plan had been set. I told Lisa to tell her mom, Mary, to come around on Saturday for my birthday. Yeah, it's not actually my birthday, but she's a presenter for a big news channel, so she's super busy. We needed to make up some special occasion, so she couldn't say no. Then I told my dad to prepare his signature dish to welcome my special guests. There's no way Mary could resist. That day, I was helping Dad with the ingredients when I heard the doorbell. I opened the door to see Lisa standing there with a pink frosted birthday cake. And by her side was her mom. Happy birthday, sweetie. This one's for you. Oh, something smells good. And so familiar. She continued. Hello? Mary? Jack? Why are you here? For Erin's birthday. And you? I'm her father. And FYI, today isn't her birthday. Yeah, jerk. Mary said under her breath while rolling her eyes. Excuse me? You dumped me for no reason. So what's that attitude? Oh, really? For no reason? My eyes darted from Dad to Mary. Huh? Why were they yelling at each other? This was very confusing, but I could guess that they used to date? OMG, what a small world! Okay, whatever, 'cause it's lunchtime now. And wow, Dad's legendary meatloaf smelled amazeballs. We sat down, and Mary glared at Dad as she took a bite of food. Then she blurted out, Oh wow, I guess some things never change, huh? Your food is still super salty. Oh really? But as I recall, someone still asked for seconds. Unbelievable! Excuse me, but do you know each other? Lisa innocently interrupted. There was an awkward silence. Then Dad said, Yeah, we do. But this is the first time I've seen Mary since we broke up, right after I visited her studio for the first time. Mary looked flustered as she replied, Lisa, you shouldn't have tricked me into coming here. Finish your food, then we're leaving. On hearing this, Dad ordered Lisa and me up to my room so he could talk to Mary in private. Only we hid behind the couch and listened in. Turns out, on that day, Mary took my dad to the studio to watch her first filming as a news presenter. After that, she'd passed by the waiting room and overheard Dad talking to someone. I clearly heard that person ask you how I looked, and you said I was still the same old Mary. Do you have any idea that I spent 2 hours in makeup and was excited to show you? Dad tried to chime in, but Mary wouldn't give him a sec. Worse still, later you even told them you were over the moon I wouldn't be your girlfriend for much longer. Thus, to intercept that, I had to break up with you first. Oh my. So my dad was a playboy or something? Lisa and I swapped confused looks, then continued watching the show. My dad was dumbfounded, and then he said in a helpless voice, Oh, Mary, things were not like that. I said that you look the same because you're always as beautiful as the day I met you. And about the other thing. Yeah? I prepared a ring to propose to you, so you'd no longer be my girlfriend, but my wife. What? So they broke up because of an absurd misunderstanding and lost contact since then. Jeez, I thought adults were meant to know what they were doing. It sure didn't seem like it at times. Mary gave Dad an awkward smile, and they said that they could be friends. Then she told him about David and how she was marrying him on the 22nd of December. No! We couldn't let this happen. There had to be another way of getting them together. But that road was full of thorns and spikes, especially when Dad dropped a bombshell. His new girlfriend, Lucy. A few days later, when I was working on my art project, Dad walked into the room with her. Excuse me? She was wearing this super tight bodycon dress and had at least 7 layers of makeup on. Ugh. Then she even dared to pick up the photo of me with Mom and smirked. Oh, how nice. I rushed over to her, snatched it out of her hands, and shouted, "Keep off my things! I don't like you!" She immediately glared at me. But then seeing Dad coming down from upstairs, she suddenly smiled and hugged me while whispering in my ear, "You don't, but you have to." Jeez, what a poisonous snake! But worse, when she left, Dad had this dumb grin on his face, and then he actually asked if I wanted her to be my new mom. Oh no, she'd hypnotized him for sure. In a rush, I called Lisa to tell her about it. She came up with the idea of asking her mom to join us at the Christmas market this week. Bummer. She refused. Apparently she had too much wedding planning to do. Ugh. And if you're thinking it couldn't get worse, then Dad invited Lucy along. So Lisa asked her mom to let her stay with me for a few days, so we could teach this Lucy some lessons. May the pranking commence. That morning, Lucy showed up in this fancy light blue dress and ordered Dad to get her a chocolate-covered waffle. What a shame. I accidentally knocked it all over her outfit. Oops! Then a fake fly somehow fell into her hot chocolate. Her eyes almost bulged out of her head when she drank that. But she just gave us a cunning smirk, then grabbed Dad's arm and cuddled close to him. Unbelievable! But you know, diamond cuts diamond. When Dad went to the restroom, with sparkling eyes, I said, "Lucy, I really admire a nice person like you. My dad's only a mechanic with $1,500 a month, but you still love him." So this isn't true. He ran his own business. But anyway. No way! He looks rich, though. Oh, he probably was just desperate to catch your attention. He bragged a little bit. And you're proud of that? That's not funny, sweetie. I am out of your dad's league. There's no way I'm putting up with a brat like you for such a poor man. Right at that moment, my dad returned and, no surprises, they broke up. Now she was out of the picture, Dad was free to win Mary over, right? We 3 went home, and I noticed that Dad was acting weird. He kept on pacing by the door. Then, when Mary arrived to pick Lisa up, he leapt to open it and blurted out to her, "Have you thought any more about us?" She didn't say anything, but I noticed them exchanging these sorry looks. Their love for each other was so obviously real, as they knew each other since they had nothing. Yet they weren't doing anything about it. It was already December 20th, meaning there were only 2 days left till the wedding day. I couldn't let our plan fail like this. I immediately grabbed my phone to call Lisa, but the ringing was next to me. She'd left her phone at my house. Dang! Then the next morning, I walked by her house to go to school as usual, but no one was home, and she wasn't at school either. Oh my, had they moved to David's already? I told Dad this right away when I got home. He thought for a second and asked me to get in the car ASAP to go to California. So our bumper 2-day road trip began. When we reached the wedding venue, it was empty. Oh no, we were too late. Dad looked devastated, so I put my arm around him and started to lead him out of there. But then the receptionist appeared and said, "Oh, didn't they let you know either? The wedding's been canceled." Dad's face lit up, and we both raced over to the car and started the long drive back. Oh, it felt like ages in the car, and now it was just 2 hours until Christmas Eve. The roads were full of beautiful Christmas decorations. I looked through the windows and saw people gathering with their families, while Dad and I were driving nonstop. How sad. We drove straight to Lisa and Mary's, but they were out, so we sat in the freezing cold on their doorstep and waited. Dad dozed off, his head resting on my shoulder. Bless. Then I saw them walking towards us. Oh man, you should have seen their shocked faces.
I shook Dad awake, and he looked over at Mary. She dropped her bags and looked at us astonished. Then Lisa told us the whole story. Turns out, on the way to California, they met two amateur robbers who forced them to get out of the car. Mary immediately pounded them with her handbag, while David ran off and hid behind a tree with Lisa. When the robbers scampered off, Mary told David everything from the bottom of her heart. That although David was wealthy, that was not what she wanted. Instead, she just needed a man who could support and protect her. She'd been flattered by his gestures of love, touched by his persistence, and thought that love could be cultivated. But things weren't as simple as that. So they broke up, and the wedding was canceled. Dad and I were stunned. Then, with eyes prickled with tears, my dad said,
"Mary, I'm sorry for letting you go. But it's not too late, is it?"
Right after, he pulled the old ring from that day out of his pocket and got down on one knee and said,
"Mary, will you marry me?"
She cried out, "Yes!" Both Lisa and I were bursting with happiness. So now we both have a mom and a dad, and we're pretty much sisters. Yay! This is the warmest Christmas ever. Bye, Auntie. I waved to her. I promise I'll be fine at home alone. That's good. I'll be back soon, Bee. Then she left. That's my Auntie Anna. I was staying with her while my parents were on vacation. I was about to walk back into the living room when the doorbell rang, so I immediately ran to the door and looked through the peephole. Ah! It was Mom! I quickly opened the door and rushed out to hug her tightly. Mommy! How come you're back so early? Mom stroked my hair and softly said,
"Oh, sweetie, I came to pick you up. How can I leave my little princess alone? Now, hurry up and pack your things."
I gave a confused look. But Auntie Anna's at the grocery store. Shouldn't we wait for her? She shook her head.
"No, sweetie. I already called her."
So we quickly packed my things, and Mom led me outside to a rather old car, which was completely different from our usual BMW. Mom, where's Dad? This isn't our car. I asked her. She knelt in front of me and, smiling, said,
"Daddy's waiting for us at the beach. It's going to be lots of fun."
I jumped up and down excitedly. Yay! I couldn't wait to build sandcastles and splash in the sea. This was so cool. On the way, I must have fallen asleep, as when I opened my eyes, it was already dark outside. I got out of the car and looked around. Where was the ocean? All I saw was some small house in an unfamiliar neighborhood.
"Beatrice, this is our new home. Just you and me from now on."
Mom's sudden words totally woke me up. Mom, why? What about Dad? I stammered.
"Listen, I'm sorry. I can't explain it to you at the moment. You're too young to understand."
I had so many questions flying around my head, but looking at Mom's sad face, I knew I shouldn't ask her anymore. The next morning, I woke up excited and curious about our new beginning here. I opened the curtain and saw a group of kids my age playing across the street. So, without thinking, I rushed outside to join them. "Hello, I'm Beach." Suddenly, my mom came out of nowhere, a frantic look on her face as she shouted,
"I've told you to stay inside!"
and pulled me back home. Everyone was gawping at us, including the man who lived across the street. It was so embarrassing. As soon as the door slammed shut, in a serious tone, she said,
"We just moved here. You shouldn't make friends with strangers that fast. And don't talk too much about yourself, okay?"
Mom had never minded me playing with other kids before, so why now? This didn't make any sense. After that, she only let me out of the house for school, and she always kept an eye on me, so that's why I couldn't make any friends here. I resented her so much. I was so lonely. One good thing about it was she didn't have any house rules, so I could spend all day watching cartoons while eating junk food, and she didn't mind at all. This was great, as before we moved here, Mom and Dad never let me do stuff like this. But eventually, I got sick of those junk foods. I felt kinda icky. I longed for Mom's special spaghetti with crab sauce, so I begged her to make it. At first, she refused, saying that she was very busy, so I kept on whining until she finally agreed. Later, I went to the kitchen for dinner, and the room was an utter chaos. Pots and pans everywhere. Mom looked messy too, as she passed me a plate of spaghetti and meatballs instead of her signature dish. Well, okay, it looked delicious anyway, so I took a full fork of it as Mom watched on. Water! I need water! Gosh, it's so salty. Mom quickly replaced my pasta plate with a box of fried chicken and said, "Today I'm busy, so I was a bit distracted. Sorry, honey." Her awkwardness made me laugh. "Nah, it's okay, Mom." Mom did seem really busy lately, as her phone was always buzzing. The calls even came late at night when I was asleep, so she always quietly went out to answer it. Guess it's hard being a single mom after all, so I tried to be more understanding. And just like that, time passed. Staying inside and having no friends became the norm for me. Still, I often sat by the window and stared longingly at the kids playing outside. Then one time, when I was doing this, Mom appeared and asked me if I wanted to go to the nearby amusement park. Wow, could there be anything better than this? I leaped up, clapped excitedly, then wrapped my arms around her. Honestly, the park was pretty small, and everything seemed kinda tired looking. But this didn't matter, as it was the best day I'd ever had. Mom never used to like rides or games, but today was different. She even got excited when she saw the beanbag throwing stall. She knocked the tins down in one go and won me this giant cuddly bunny. I've never seen her have fun like this before. My mom is so cool. Afterward, Mom left me sitting on a bench and she went off to get some ice cream. Suddenly, I saw her rushing back, and without ice creams. She pulled on my hand and in an urgent tone said, "We need to go home. We're moving." So we packed up our things and left in a rush. I kept on asking Mom what was going on, but she dodged my questions. During the car journey, I heard her mutter to herself, "We're going somewhere new. It'll be exciting. A new adventure. Yes, it'll be fine this time." I may have been young, but I wasn't stupid. I knew she was hiding something. But she's my mom, and I didn't want to upset her by bugging her with questions. So I stayed quiet and eventually fell asleep. Once again, I woke up in an unfamiliar place and stared out of the window. I wasn't as bothered about this place as I was about the last. I didn't want to get too attached to it, as I didn't know how long it'd be before Mom made us move again. But there was one thing that bothered me. Across the street was a man looking straight at our new house. He looked identical to our previous neighbor. Maybe he'd just moved here too? What a coincidence! I mentioned the man to Mom, but she told me she didn't know him, and then sternly told me never to interact with him. At school, I was the strange kid who didn't talk to anyone. The older I got, the worse this felt. And the other kids laughed at me, and I heard them call me weird behind my back. I felt so lonely and depressed. So at home, I often just sat by the window with a book and tried to pretend that the adventures I was reading about were happening to me. Worse still, Mom was acting even odder than usual. The other day when I got home from school, I found her chucking perfectly good food out of the fridge. Some were even brand new. I asked her what she was doing, and she replied, "It's gone off, so I'm getting rid of it." Then she started scrubbing the fridge. "The smell won't go. Why won't it go?" What was she talking about? Everything seemed fine. What's happening? Then I discovered that Mom often left the house late at night and didn't return till dawn. I knew if I asked her about this, she wouldn't say anything. So that night, I snuck out and followed her. Mom was wearing dark clothes with a hat and a big scarf covering her face, even though it's not that cold outside. Why the disguise? Then, can you believe it? I spotted her going over to the neighbor's house and cuddling him on his porch. I jumped out of the darkness and shouted, "Mom, what's going on? I thought we weren't meant to talk to this man." She gave me an alarmed look. At that moment, Mom received a text. In a panicked voice, she said to me, "Beatrice, we have to go. Now! I'll explain everything later, I promise." Right after that, the mysterious man waved at us and told us to get in his car. Then he sped through the night. After regaining my senses, I turned to my mom and asked, "I hope this explanation is good." Actually, we're in danger, honey. It's your dad. He's an imposter. I only figured this out when I was on vacation with him, and I've been running from him ever since." What? I'd never suspected my dad of being someone else. It made no sense. Then, through sobs, my mom continued to say that my real dad was actually a member of a secret organization, but he had been missing for a while, and now the organization was after us. She often received anonymous messages and calls threatening her. She didn't want me talking to strangers in case they were spies. And those times when she threw all the food out was because she'd received texts threatening to poison the food in our house. She wiped her tears away, then said, "This is Joe. We went to college together, and he's been such a help. We fell in love, but I didn't dare tell you because I was afraid you wouldn't understand." I looked at this Joe guy. I don't know. There was something off about him, but maybe I was just being paranoid. I mean, he had helped Mom out, right? What's that? Ever since I found out about the secret organization, I've been kinda jittery. What if they suddenly turn up and take me and my mom away? I know Mom's worried too, as she seemed so distant. I just want to make things better for us both. Then Christmas arrived. It was quite the special one, as for the first time since we went into hiding, we had guests. Well, one guest, Joe. We raised our glasses for a Merry Christmas, but instead of putting it down, my mom gulped it back in one go. "Mom, are you drinking tonight?" I asked skeptically. "Of course, my dear. It's Christmas. Let me tell you, I'm no less than a man when it comes to drinking." I chewed on my lip as I thought about this. Mom had an alcohol allergy, and at the most, she only had tiny sips. Suddenly, a thought came to mind. Maybe Dad wasn't the imposter after all. Maybe it had been Mom all along. She enjoyed the roller coaster rides, though to my recollection, Mom was afraid of heights. She couldn't cook. She now loved Joe, a strange man, and she could have downed alcohol without being ill. If this was true, then who could I trust now? Something wasn't right. I could feel it in my gut. So the next day, I secretly went to the cops instead of school as usual. Then I found out something crazy. Turns out, my real parents had been looking for me for over the past 6 years. OMG! As for the mother I was living with, who was she? I tried to stay calm while waiting for the police to contact my parents first. And as soon as they got there, the three of us broke down in tears. That's when my real mom told the whole truth. Actually, she had a twin sister called Linda. No one had ever known about Linda, as due to her debt problems, my grandpa rejected her and forbade her to ever show up in front of anyone in the family. But my mom couldn't disown her own twin, so she secretly gave her money. Then one time, Linda was asking for too much that Mom turned her down. Unexpectedly, she came and took me away to pressure my mom to send her more money. During that time, my mom kept transferring her money to make sure I'd be provided for. She hadn't given any information about Linda to the cops, though, because Mom still wanted to talk to her first, though, so that her sister wouldn't end up in trouble. Wow, this was a lot to take in. After that, Mom ran over to Dad, who's in line to talk to the police. She grabbed his hand and begged him to give Auntie Linda a chance. As you see, I missed out on having a normal childhood because of my aunt, and what she did was wrong. But there's a part of me that will always care for her, as she raised me for all these years. And my heart urged me to say, "Dad, I didn't want to turn her in either." My dad looked at me hesitantly, but in the end, he nodded in agreement. so we decided to deal with it ourselves without the intervention of the police. Then, the next day as planned, I was in the front yard with my fake mom when her identical twin marched up to our house and confronted her. Once my Auntie Linda got over the initial shock, she confessed everything to me. It was sad, but glad that it's all over now. Mom paid off her sister's debts with one condition, that she would never, ever get near me again. Now I'm back home, with my actual parents. It's going to take some getting used to, as I've forgotten how to make friends, and going outside alone makes me nervous. Looks like the memories of the adventure with my uninvited Aunt Linda might follow me for quite some more time. I know I have to try and move forward. I can't get back the past 6 years, but I can do my best to try and embrace the future.